I always believed I had the perfect childhood. I can still remember the long summer days when Danny and I would play soccer in the back alleys, barefoot, our laughter echoing off the brick walls. We didn't need smartphones or the endless distraction of video games back then. Life was simple, and we were kings of our own little world. We knew every crack in the sidewalk, every secret corner where we could escape from the world and just be ourselves. Danny and I were inseparable. We had been best friends since we were kids, and our bond was forged in the fires of scraped knees and shared victories on the soccer field. We had each other's backs, no matter what. When I was picked on at school, Danny was there, throwing punches to defend me. When Danny's parents fought, he'd stay at my place. The two of us huddled under the covers, pretending the world wasn't crumbling around us. It was us against the world, and I thought it always would be. Things started to change when we hit our teenage years, though. Life got more complicated, as it always does. High school happened. Girls happened. And even though Danny and I went to different schools, we stayed close, at least at first. Danny had always been the popular one. The girls loved him, and he knew it. He was charming, good-looking, and had that effortless confidence that drew people in. Me? Not so much. I was quieter, more reserved. I didn't mind watching Danny work his magic at parties while I stayed in the background. I wasn't jealous, not at all. But then came Nancy. Nancy wasn't like the other girls. She was sweet, smart, and had a kindness that set her apart. From the moment we started dating, I knew she was special. She wasn't just beautiful. She had this energy about her that made everything feel lighter, like the world wasn't as heavy when she was around. I was convinced she was the one. For the first time, I felt like I had something Danny didn't. He was always the one with girls trailing after him, but I had Nancy. She was mine, and I was proud of it. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. It all came crashing down at a frat party during our second year of college. That night, the alcohol was flowing freely, and I got carried away. We all did, but I hit my limit quicker than usual. I remember the moment I started to feel sick, the room spinning around me as I tried to keep my balance. Nancy and Danny helped me upstairs, and Danny laid me down on a bed in one of the bedrooms. "You're gonna be fine, man. Just sleep it off," Danny said, giving me a reassuring smile. Nancy kissed me on the forehead before I drifted off, the sound of muffled music filling the air. I passed out almost immediately, but something didn't feel right. Even in my hazy, half-conscious state, I had a sinking feeling deep in my gut. There was a heaviness that lingered, a weight on my chest that I couldn't explain. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache, but that wasn't what bothered me. It was the awkward silence between Nancy and Danny when I saw them downstairs. They weren't acting like themselves. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself I was just imagining things, but I wasn't. It took a few days, but eventually the truth came out. One of the girls at the party, clearly drunk and with no filter, slipped up and mentioned seeing Nancy and Danny together after they put me to bed. "They were really cozy," she said with a giggle. I felt my stomach drop. I confronted Nancy first, and she crumbled almost immediately. She confessed. She and Danny had crossed a line that night after I passed out, and it wasn't just a one-time mistake. They'd been seeing each other behind my back for weeks. Danny, my best friend, had betrayed me. And Nancy, the girl I thought I'd spend my life with, had done the same. It felt like a knife to the heart. Double betrayal. The pain was so deep, so raw, that it felt like the ground beneath me had shattered, and I was falling into a pit of darkness. After the truth came out, everything fell apart. I couldn't talk to Danny or Nancy. I couldn't even look at them without feeling a surge of rage and pain. The three of us were supposed to be inseparable, but now? Now it felt like I was the outsider, watching as my best friend and my girlfriend tore my world to pieces. I dropped out of our social circles, stopped going to parties, and even avoided the campus hangouts we used to frequent. Depression swallowed me whole. My grades suffered, my motivation disappeared, and I withdrew into myself. People noticed, but no one said anything. Even my parents, who were usually so attentive, didn't know how to help me. The pain turned into something darker, something colder. It became resentment. And then, that resentment turned into the need for revenge. I started thinking about how I could hurt Danny the way he hurt me. It wasn't enough that he'd destroyed my relationship with Nancy. I wanted to hit him where it would hurt the most, to make him feel the same kind of betrayal and anger that was consuming me. And that's when I thought about Bella. Danny's mom, Bella, was unlike any other woman I'd ever known. She was beautiful, stunning, really. You wouldn't guess her age if you saw her from a distance. She had this air of sophistication about her, always carrying herself with grace. Danny's friends, including me, used to joke about how she didn't look like a typical mom. She was too perfect, too well put together. But she was always kind to me, too kind in retrospect. At first, the idea of getting close to her felt wrong. She was Danny's mom. But as my anger festered, I began to see her differently. She became a symbol of revenge, a way to hit Danny where he wouldn't expect it. And then the perfect opportunity presented itself. Our parents would visit us in college every 6 months or so, just to check in, make sure we weren't burning our dorms down or skipping classes. This time, my parents couldn't make it. Our family dog had fallen seriously ill, and my mom needed to stay home to take care of him. So, when I was sitting in the park that afternoon, preparing for Hanukkah and lost in my thoughts, I wasn't expecting to see Bella at all. I certainly wasn't expecting her to approach me, let alone touch my hair in such an affectionate way. "Hey," Bella said with that smile I knew so well. "How are you, sweetheart? It's been too long." I looked up, caught off guard, but then smiled. "Hi, Mrs. Bell. I didn't think you'd be visiting today. I'm here checking in on Danny, but he's busy right now." She sighed and sat beside me on the bench, resting her hand lightly on my arm. "You look troubled. What's on your mind?" For a moment, I hesitated, but then I decided to tell her everything except for the part where her son was the one who had betrayed me. I told her how Nancy had cheated on me, how heartbroken I was, and how I'd been feeling lost ever since. Bella's eyes softened with sympathy, and before I knew it, she was holding my hand and telling me how sorry she was. Her words were so comforting, so gentle, that I felt something shift between us. There was an intimacy in the air that hadn't been there before. "I know how hard it is," she said softly. "Men can be so disappointing." Her touch lingered a little too long. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. The idea of revenge started to solidify in my mind. We talked for hours, mostly about school, life, and relationships, but the underlying tension was undeniable. It was like we were dancing around something that neither of us wanted to say out loud. And then, she invited me to have coffee with her back in my room. Back in my room, things escalated quickly. We talked for a bit, and Bella continued to comfort me, but soon the conversation turned more physical. Her hand rested on my knee, and before I knew it, I was lying on the bed, and Bella was in control. It was quick, it was passionate, and it was undeniably wrong. But I didn't stop it. In fact, I reveled in it. Bella had always been Danny's protector, the one who doted on him, but now I had crossed a line no one else had dared to cross. I had taken something from him, something precious, something that would crush him if he ever found out. When it was over, Bella got dressed and smoothed down her hair, giving me a small smile. "Let's keep this between us," she said, her voice soft but firm. "No need for Danny to know." I agreed, of course. There was no need for Danny to know. Not yet, at least. At first, I felt a sense of satisfaction, a twisted sense of justice. I had avenged myself in the best way possible, with the most unexpected weapon, his own mother. Every time I saw Danny after that, I couldn't help but smirk, knowing what I'd done. He didn't suspect a thing. To him, I was still the friend he had betrayed. But as time passed, something started to gnaw at me. The satisfaction I had felt at first began to fade, replaced by a deeper sense of unease. Bella hadn't mentioned it again, and neither had I, but the memory of what had happened was still there, lingering in the back of my mind. I had crossed a line I never thought I would cross, and now I was living with the consequences. I began to wonder if it was worth it. Was this really revenge, or was I just destroying myself? And then things took a darker turn. One evening, a few weeks after my encounter with Bella, I received a message from her. "We need to talk. Urgently." I wasn't sure what to expect, but when I met her in a secluded part of town, she seemed different. Nervous. Unsteady. "It's about what happened between us," she began, her voice trembling. "I've been thinking about it. A lot. And there are things you don't know, things I haven't told you." I stared at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Bella took a deep breath and looked around, as if checking to make sure no one was watching. "Danny, he's not who you think he is. There's something darker about him, something I've been trying to protect you from." My heart raced. What was she talking about? What did she know about Danny that I didn't? But before she could explain further, her phone rang, and she quickly silenced it, glancing at me with fear in her eyes. "We'll talk later," she whispered urgently. "But please be careful." With that, she disappeared into the night, leaving me standing there, confused and on edge. Bella's cryptic words echoed in my mind for days. What was she hiding? What could possibly be so dangerous about Danny? I knew he wasn't perfect. He was a womanizer, sure, and had betrayed me, but what could be worse than that? As I dug deeper, I began to notice things I hadn't before. Danny had been acting strange lately, more secretive, more paranoid. He was making calls late at night, and I overheard parts of conversations that didn't make sense. There were mentions of money, threats, and something about a deal. I started to wonder if Bella's warnings weren't about our fling at all, but about something far darker, something that involved Danny's past, or maybe his future. It was then that I realized my revenge might have set off a chain of events I wasn't prepared for. I couldn't shake Bella's cryptic warning. The idea that Danny, my Danny, was hiding something far darker than I could have ever imagined kept gnawing at me. I thought I knew him. We had grown up together, shared secrets, gone through the highs and lows of life. But now I realized there was a side to him I had never seen, a side that had been lurking in the shadows all this time. Danny had changed. He was more erratic, disappearing for long stretches of time, avoiding me in a way that felt deliberate. But every now and then, I caught glimpses of him, pale, anxious, always looking over his shoulder. There was something wrong, and I had a sinking feeling that I had just scratched the surface. I needed answers. I started asking around, talking to mutual friends, even sneaking peeks at Danny's phone whenever he left it unattended. The more I dug, the more I discovered things that didn't add up. There were strange calls at odd hours, numbers with no names saved in his contact. There were whispered conversations with people I had never seen before, guys who didn't look like the typical college crowd. They were older, rougher, and they had a certain edge to them that made me uneasy. One night, I followed Danny. He had left the dorm around midnight, sneaking out like he didn't want anyone to see him. I trailed behind him, careful to stay out of sight. He walked fast, his head down, his hands in his pockets. It was a part of town I didn't recognize, far from the bars and college hangouts we were used to. Eventually, Danny stopped in front of an old, run-down warehouse. I watched from a distance as he slipped inside through a side door, looking over his shoulder the whole time. I waited for a few minutes before moving closer, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't go in. Instead, I pressed my ear to the wall and listened. There were voices inside, low, menacing. Danny's voice was one of them, but it was shaky, nervous. I couldn't make out everything they were saying, but I caught enough. "I told you, I just need more time," Danny's voice trembled. "Time's running out, kid," another voice growled. "You're in too deep, and we don't give second chances. Pay up, or you know what happens." Danny stammered something in response, but I couldn't hear it. My mind was reeling. It didn't take long to figure out what was going on. Danny had gotten himself involved in something dangerous. He owed money, and whoever he owed it to wasn't the kind of person who waited patiently for their debts to be repaid. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had heard. I needed to talk to Bella. She knew more than she was letting on, and I wasn't going to let her keep me in the dark any longer. I called her, my voice tense as I asked her to meet me in the park where we had first talked. She agreed, though I could hear the hesitation in her voice. When we met, Bella seemed anxious, fidgeting with her hands as she sat beside me. She didn't have the same confidence she usually carried with her. There was something weighing on her, and I was about to find out what. "You know about Danny's problem, don't you?" I asked, my voice low but firm. Bella's eyes darted to mine, wide with surprise. She didn't answer at first, but her silence told me everything I needed to know. "Tell me what's going on," I pressed. "I followed him last night. I heard what they said to him." Bella let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling as she spoke. "I didn't want you to find out like this. I've been trying to protect him. To protect both of you." "From what?" I demanded. "What has Danny gotten himself into?" She looked away, staring at the ground as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Danny's in debt. A lot of debt. He got involved with some bad people, very bad people. It started out small, just some gambling here and there, but it spiraled out of control. They're loan sharks, and they don't play by the rules." I felt a knot form in my stomach as I listened. I had no idea Danny had been gambling. He had always been the carefree, charming guy who never seemed to have a care in the world. But this? This was something else entirely. "How bad is it?" I asked, my voice tight. Bella hesitated before answering, her voice trembling. "He owes them thousands. I don't even know how much at this point. Every time he thinks he's close to paying them off, they add more interest, more penalties. They've threatened him, and I'm scared they'll do something worse if he doesn't pay soon." Hearing this made everything click into place. Danny's strange behavior, his secrecy, the calls in the middle of the night, it all made sense now. He wasn't just being careless or reckless. He was in real danger, and it was a danger that could swallow him whole if he wasn't careful. But there was something else, something darker lurking beneath the surface, a nagging feeling that Bella wasn't telling me everything. Her anxiety seemed too personal, too intense, and I couldn't help but wonder, was she just worried about Danny, or was she hiding something more? As Bella stood to leave, I grabbed her arm gently, my eyes locking with hers. "There's more to this, isn't there?" She froze, her eyes widening with fear. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but then quickly shut it. Whatever she was hiding, it was big. "Bella," I said quietly, "you can't protect him by keeping secrets. If I'm going to help, I need to know the truth. All of it." For a moment, she just stood there, silent. But then, with a shaky breath, she looked at me with a sadness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. "It's not just Danny's debt," she whispered. "It's what he's done to pay it." The words hung in the air between us like a dark cloud. Bella's confession sent chills down my spine, and I felt the weight of what she wasn't saying pressing down on me. There was something even more sinister beneath the surface, something I was starting to realize might have put Danny, and possibly me, on a collision course with disaster. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Bella looked away, tears brimming in her eyes. "He's been doing things, illegal things to try and pay them off. At first, it was just running small errands for them, delivering packages, making drops, but now they've pulled him into something deeper, something more dangerous." My stomach churned. Danny had gotten himself into the criminal underworld, and now he was in too deep to get out. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Danny, my best friend, was not just in debt. He was trapped in a world of crime that was slowly consuming him. "And now he's running out of time," Bella whispered. "They want more from him. They want him to take on riskier jobs, things that could get him hurt or worse." I had to act, but I didn't know how. What could I do against a world I didn't understand? Danny had betrayed me once, but I couldn't just let him fall into this abyss without at least trying to pull him out. The weight of the situation pressed down on me like a vice. I knew I had to confront Danny, but what could I even say? How could I face him, knowing that we had both betrayed each other in ways neither of us had imagined? And then there was Bella, his mother. She was tangled up in this just as much as Danny and I were. The night we spent together weighed on me more heavily now, tainted by the dark spiral of secrets that connected all of us. Was she using me, or had we both used each other in a twisted form of revenge? I found Danny later that evening. He was sitting alone in the common area of our dorm, hunched over with his head in his hands. He didn't look like the confident, charming friend I had known growing up. He looked defeated, broken. "Danny," I said softly, sitting down next to him. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me. For a moment we sat in silence. But then, without looking up, he muttered, "I know you've been following me." My heart skipped a beat. He knew. "I'm not mad," he continued, his voice barely audible. "Honestly, I figured you'd figure it out eventually. I just didn't know how to tell you." I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "Why didn't you come to me?" Danny finally looked up, his eyes hollow. "Because I'm a screw-up, and I didn't want to drag you down with me." Danny spilled everything. He told me about the gambling, how it started off small, just a few bets here and there to pass the time. But then the debts piled up. At first, it was manageable, but soon, he found himself owing more than he could ever hope to repay. The loan sharks came for him, and in desperation, he agreed to work for them. "It's not just money anymore," Danny confessed, his voice shaking. "They've got me doing things I can't take back. I don't know how to get out of this." My stomach twisted as I listened to him describe the jobs he had been forced to do, transporting drugs, making deliveries for dangerous people, even acting as muscle for the loan sharks. It was worse than I had imagined. "They want me to do something bigger now," Danny said, his voice breaking. "Something I can't walk away from." My mind raced. He was talking about something serious, something that could get him killed. Or worse. "What do they want you to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Danny looked away, tears filling his eyes. "They want me to hurt someone. To send a message." I sat there, staring at Danny in disbelief. How had things gotten this bad? How had my best friend, the guy I had grown up with, the guy I had trusted, fallen this far? And now, he was faced with an impossible choice: commit a violent crime or face the wrath of the people who owned him. But there was another layer to this, a layer that Danny didn't know about. I had slept with his mother, Bella, the woman who had raised him, who had cared for him. And now, she was caught up in this mess too, trying to protect her son from the consequences of his actions. I knew I couldn't let Danny go through with it. But stopping him wouldn't be easy. The loan sharks wouldn't just let him walk away, and I wasn't sure how far they'd go to enforce their will. The room felt colder, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Danny was on the brink of losing everything: his freedom, his future, his life. And the deeper we went, the more I realized that I wasn't just trying to save him. I was trying to save myself too.